The kind of quiet that settles into a person at 28 is different from the quiet of old age. It doesn't have the weathered acceptance of someone who has lived long enough to make peace with loss. It has edges. It sits wrong. It is the quiet of someone who should be loud, who should be out somewhere on a Friday night with people who know his name, but who has instead learned, through one specific and irreversible event, how to be very still in a world that keeps moving without him. Raymond Cole was 28 years old, and he ate breakfast alone every morning at Patty's Corner Diner on Elmwood and 5th in Grover Falls, Ohio, and he had been doing it for 3 years, which meant he had started at 25, which was 6 weeks after the accident. Patty's was the kind of place that had no reason to still exist and existed. Anyway, a cracked vinyl booths, a laminated menu that hadn't changed since the previous owner, coffee that came in a glass pot that Marcus, the cook, refilled every 40 minutes whether it needed it or not. Raymond took the corner booth by the window every morning at 7:15. He ordered 2 eggs over easy, wheat toast, black coffee. He ate without looking at his phone. He paid, tipped, and left by 8, walking the 4 blocks back to the apartment on Candler Street that he had moved into after he could no longer be in the house. He was not unattractive, tall, dark-haired, with the kind of face that looked like it had been designed for laughing, and had simply forgotten how. He worked remotely as a structural engineer for a firm based in Columbus, which meant he spent his days at a desk by the window of his apartment doing precise and focused work that suited him because it required his full attention and left no room for anything else. His colleagues knew him as responsive, thorough, and slightly difficult to read. His neighbors knew him as the guy in 4B who nodded in the hallway. His friends from before, and there had been friends genuinely, a whole life full of them, had tried for about a year and a half and then, one by one, had stopped trying in the way people do when someone makes it clear, without saying so, that they are not available. He had been engaged to a woman named Callie Marsh. They had been together since college. 4 years of the kind of relationship that other people pointed to, not perfect, but real, the kind built on actual knowledge of each other rather than on the performance of being in love. She had been 24 when a driver ran a red light on Henderson Avenue at 9:40 on a Tuesday morning, and she had been 24 when the paramedics arrived, and 24 when Raymond got the call at his desk, and 24 when the hospital said there was nothing more they could do, and she had stayed 24 after that, which was the thing Raymond could not move past. Not the grief exactly, because grief was supposed to have motion, but the stillness of her being permanently, unchangeably 24 while he kept getting older without her. He didn't talk about this. He didn't talk about much. He came to Patty's every morning because he had stopped being able to make breakfast in his apartment. Callie had been the one who cooked breakfast. She made eggs the same way he ordered them now, over easy. And every time he cracked one into a pan, he heard her voice telling him the trick was medium heat and patience, and he couldn't do it anymore, so he didn't. The new waitress started the first Monday of October. Her name was Sarah Hutchins, and she was 32, and she had come back to Grover Falls after a decade in Columbus, where she had worked as a nurse in a trauma unit, which was the kind of job that either broke a person or gave them a particular quality of attention, a sharpness about what mattered and what didn't, an ability to be present with people in the middle of difficult things without flinching. Sarah had that quality. She had also, after 10 years, reached a point of exhaustion that wasn't about the work itself, but about the accumulated weight of it, and she had come home to reset, which was what she told people. And what she meant was that she needed to be somewhere that didn't require her to hold everything together every minute of every day. She noticed Raymond on her 3rd shift, not because he was young, though he was notably younger than the usual morning regulars, but because of the way he sat. She had seen that posture in hospital rooms. It was the posture of someone managing something large by keeping very still, the way you hold a full glass when you're walking across a room and any movement risks spilling. She watched him for a week before she said anything. She brought his coffee, took his order, refilled without being asked, and he thanked her each time in a way that was genuine but compact. A man who had learned to keep his interactions small. On a Wednesday, slow morning, she set the coffee pot on the warmer and stood at the edge of his table and said, "Can I ask you something?" Raymond looked up. He had dark eyes and a face that was young in structure, but carried something heavier in the expression. The way a house can be new construction but still feel like it has history. "Sure," he said. "You come in every day," Sarah said. "Same time, same order, same booth." And you always look like you're waiting for something that's not coming. She paused. I'm not trying to be nosy. I spent 10 years in a trauma unit and I notice things I'm probably not supposed to notice. Raymond looked at her for a long moment. Most people ask questions as a formality, already moving toward the reassuring answer. She was actually standing there, actually waiting. My fiancé used to make breakfast, he said. I can't make it myself anymore. Sarah looked at him steadily. Used to? She said, not pressing, just leaving the door open. She died 3 years ago, Raymond said. Car accident. Sarah didn't say she was sorry. She didn't say anything for a moment, and the silence was not uncomfortable but careful. The way silence is when someone is actually holding what you've said rather than waiting for their turn to speak. The eggs here are good, she said finally. They are, Raymond said. She picked up the coffee pot and went back to her other tables. Raymond finished his breakfast and paid and left. And for the first time in a long time, the walk home felt slightly different. Not lighter, exactly, but less sealed. He thought about the conversation most of the day, which was unusual. His days were generally clean of residue, 1 hour replacing the next without leaving much behind. This one stuck. She was working the next morning, and when she brought his coffee, she said, without preamble, I lost a patient once, young woman, 23, and I couldn't go into the break room for 6 months because she and I had eaten lunch together there a few times and it smelled the same. She moved on before he could respond. He sat with it through his eggs. When she came to refill his cup, he said, Did it change eventually? She stopped. The smell's the same, she said. I just have a different relationship with it now. He nodded. She left. He stayed 15 minutes longer than usual. It grew in the way that real things grow. Not in large gestures, but in small accumulated moments. She told him about the trauma unit and the cases that had stayed with her. He told her about structural engineering, about the way a bridge had to account for forces it would never be tested by, had to be built for conditions beyond what was expected. She listened in the particular way of someone who understood that people often said things about their work that were actually about something else. In November, she sat down across from him during her break for the first time. She had brought her own coffee and she set it on the table and looked at him and said, Is this okay? Yes, he said, and meant it. They talked for 25 minutes about things that mattered and things that didn't, and the line between them was comfortable. She told him she had been engaged once too, briefly, to someone who turned out to want a version of her that didn't actually exist. He said that sounded exhausting. She said it had been and laughed, and it was the first time he had heard her laugh properly, and it was a good one, unguarded. He walked home that morning thinking about Callie, not with the usual tightness, but with something softer, the memory of her as a memory, rather than as an open wound. He sat at his desk by the window and worked, and at some point in the afternoon, realized he had not checked the time in 2 hours, which had not happened in longer than he could remember. In December, he came in one morning and sat down, and Sarah brought his coffee, and then, instead of leaving, she sat down across from him without asking. It was snowing on Elmwood, the first real snow of the season. I want to ask you something, she said. And you can say no. Okay, Raymond said. My friend is having a thing on Saturday. Dinner at her place, few people, nothing big. She wrapped both hands around her coffee cup. I thought maybe you'd want to come. Not as anything, just out of the diner, in the world. Raymond looked at the snow on Elmwood. He thought about the apartment on Candler Street and the desk by the window and the evenings that passed without incident or texture. I haven't done anything like that in a while, he said. I know, Sarah said. That's sort of why I'm asking. He looked at her across the table. She had the particular quality of people who are comfortable with uncertainty, who could make an offer and hold it open without needing it to go any particular way. He recognized it as a kind of courage. Okay, he said. She nodded and picked up her coffee, and that was that. He went on Saturday. It was 7 people in a small warm house on the north side of Grover Falls. The kind of dinner where no one was performing anything, and the conversation moved from topic to topic without agenda. He was quiet at first, which was his nature, but Sarah introduced him to people without making him into a project. Just his name and that he was an engineer, and people talked to him like a person, which was something he had forgotten could feel like anything. He drove home at 11 and sat in his car in the parking lot of his building for a few minutes before going up. He was not happy. Happiness still felt like a country, whose language he had forgotten, but he was something, present, available, like a window that had been painted shut for a long time and had just been opened a crack, enough to feel that there was air on the other side. He came into Patty's the following Monday at 7:10, 5 minutes earlier than usual, and Sarah brought his coffee before he sat down, which she had started doing, and he looked up at her and said, "Thank you, for Saturday." She set the pot down. "Did you have an okay time?" "I did," he said. "I actually did." She smiled, not a large smile, but a real one, and went back to her other tables. And Raymond sat in the corner booth by the window and watched the snow on Elmwood and drank his coffee, while it was still hot, which was something Callie had always told him to do. Drink it while it's hot. Ray, you always let it go cold, and this time he did. He did not stop grieving. That was not the story. But grief, he was beginning to understand, was not a room you left and locked behind you. It was something you learned to carry differently, and on certain mornings, with the right kind of company and the snow, coming down on Elmwood and a cup of coffee, still warm in your hands, you could almost forget the weight of it. Not forever, just long enough to remember that you were still here and that still here was, against all the evidence of the last 3 years, enough to build something from. He came back the next morning, and the one after that,